It's finally here. After a month-long wait since the end of Season 4 Part 1, everything was answered in the 5 episodes we were just given. The identity of the Eat the Rich killer, the incorporation of Love and Beck from the trailer, and the answer on if something happened to Marienne. This second part was exactly what the 4th season needed after a somewhat tamer first installment. We saw the evil Joe that we hate to love, and it was good. So with that, let's recap, break down, and explain everything that there was to take away from this latest installment. So let's get into it. Here is You Season 4 Part 2 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Let's break this down by the main talking points. So, was Rhys real? As was predicted in a previous video that I did at the end of Season 4 Part 1, we saw that Rhys was in fact real. But the version that Joe was speaking to was something that Joe had created inside of his mind. And due to becoming obsessed with the book that Rhys wrote, evil side of his mind was something that took the form of Rhys Montrose. He did this as a way of being able to justify the killings and the taking of Marienne, showing that the conversations that he had never actually happened. This was revealed to us when we saw that Joe approached Rhys's actual location and confronted him. Rhys knew nothing of Joe and acted as though he'd never met him, because he never had. This meant that Joe was in fact the Eat the Rich killer, and he was doing it in a blacked out state. Joe killed Malcolm at the start because he spoke wrongly of Marienne. He killed Simon because he was stealing the work of less fortunate people than him and taking credit for it. And he killed Gemma because she was cottoning on to the fact that people had started dying from the moment that he turned up. These would all be done in a blacked out state, and then when he would come to, the killing would be done and he would be in the same spot where he blacked out. This made sense as to why the evidence kept popping up, the text messages were disappearing, and it was easy for Rhys to access his apartment as and when he needed to. It was with the revelation of Rhys that we got one of the biggest revelations in the series, and that was that Marienne never made it back to Paris, but we'll touch on that in a moment. Rhys essentially became the dark side of Joe's mind for the rest of the season, and we saw that it was the voice inside of his head spurring him on to do all of the bad things. For example, he wanted him to kill Marienne, kill Tom Lockwood, and many other things. There was a moment in the finale where we saw that Joe confronted Rhys, aka the dark side of his mind, on the bridge before he jumped. Joe understood that this dark part inside of him only ever wanted the best for Joe, and that he did it because he was looking out for himself, showing us that in the final moments he was still justifying why he did all of those terrible things. His justification was because he wanted Joe to feel the love that he deserved. Right at the end of the season, long after the dark side of Joe's mind was dead and buried, we saw that as Joe looked outside of the window, within the reflection there was Rhys Montrose smiling back at him, showing that the dark side is back and present within Joe's mind. He doesn't need to bury it now, because he has the resources in Kate to cover up anything if it needs to be done. So Joe is essentially able to act how he wants and is able to get away with it, due to the power that Kate's name has. Love and Beck's return. There was a great moment in episode 9 of the show where we saw that Joe started hallucinating after waking up, and we got a trip down memory lane of all of the women that Joe had killed as he was searching for the key to be able to get Marienne out of the cage. I knew this scene was going to be a good one when it started with the song Love by Sinatra. It made me think that Pedretti's character was only a few moments away, and it definitely was. The scene started with love and it finished with it. After seeing Gemma, we saw Guinevere Beck returned and confronted Joe in a hallucinated state where she mentioned to Joe how she did nothing wrong, but he killed her. This was at a time where Joe was trying to justify his actions inside of his own mind from all of the things that he'd ever done in the past, and he was slowly coming to terms with the fact that he was an evil person. Then it finished with Love, who was a hallucination. She was the main person who made Joe realize that his version of love is loving somebody to the point where nobody else can have them, and he ultimately ends up killing them, showing that the only way for the cycle to be broken was for him to get rid of himself, hence why we saw the scene in the finale. The return of the characters were perfect and they added value to the developing plot. They allowed Joe to see himself for who he actually was and realize how he felt that he needed to deal with the situation. Did Marienne survive? For the first time, one of Joe's characters actually got a happy ending, and that was Marienne. So it turned out that Joe didn't actually let Marienne get on the train back to Paris. His alter ego had started taking over by then, and we saw that he poisoned her coffee, took her, and then put her in his infamous box that he had built. As soon as the scene of Kate and Joe happened, where they were walking past the Indian restaurant, I knew that it was going to be where his box was. I thought we got some of Penn Badgley's best acting chops when he was interacting with Marienne. We saw just how much of a deranged, obsessive lunatic that he was when he didn't even recognize himself anymore. He didn't know who Joe Goldberg was, and was solely living as Professor Jonathan Moore, believing that he was talking to Rhys. It was once he started coming back to reality that he was piecing together where Marienne was, and that he needed to get her out. However, what he didn't know was that Nadia was on his case and knew that Marienne was within the box due to her finding the key in his flat. I did find Nadia's involvement to be a bit much, and I didn't really feel as though her character gave off those vibes in the first part, leading it to feel a bit abrupt when she was breaking into Joe's house straight away. But I can look past that because it did ultimately work. Once Joe saw sense, he went to the cage, but by then Marienne was dead, and we were led to believe that she was. But in actual fact, there was a deeper twist that was revealed right at the end. Nadia and Marienne worked on a plan. There were these things that Marienne could take, which would slow her heart down, which would make Joe think that she was gone. But in actual fact, she was just heavily sedated. Nadia ultimately followed Joe to where he left her, and she gave her a shock to wake her up. This meant that Marienne was essentially free, and Joe believed that she was gone, meaning that he would no longer go after her, because if he believed that she was dead, then there's nothing to be obsessed with. This then allowed her to go back to Paris and get a somewhat happy ending, being reunited with her daughter. This does mean that a potential return for Marienne could be on the cards in a final season where Joe gets taken down. Who was the photographer lady? Well, this was something that didn't actually contribute that much to the overarching plot, but it meant that suspicions were pointed in Joe's direction for a small period of time, and it meant that Nadia was extremely interested in Joe. The photographer was a stalker, not part of the press. She was extremely obsessed with Phoebe and believed that they were best friends. She took Phoebe to a hotel room and kept her there, which alerted the police, and then once Joe got into the room, he put Simon's ear within her bag, which meant that she was framed for being the Eat the Rich killer, allowing the pressure to be off of Joe. So what happened to everybody at the end? Right at the end, we saw that after Joe killed Kate's controlling father, jumped off of the bridge, and we were led to believe that he was gone, we saw that he woke up in a hospital and Kate was there. This was a real turning point for the character. Joe had cared deeply for Kate throughout the entirety of Season 4, and she was the thing that he was thinking about when he was sinking deeper and deeper. Upon waking up, we saw that he actually told Kate everything about his past, and she promised to stand by him because she loved him. He revealed his real name to her, which was a strong moment. All Joe had ever wanted was to be seen, heard, and loved, and Kate is somebody who actually gives that to him. The plan is for both of them to keep each other good, so I imagine we'll see how that's going to go. Joe finished off in New York City being with Kate, who's essentially enabling him to be able to do as he wants. He's essentially become extremely famous for being the person that's got a second chance at life after escaping a murderous wife. He got his bookstore, which we don't know if it's the same one as the first season, but I sure hope it is, seeing as though they're back in New York. Nadia wanted to make sure that Joe wasn't able to do what he did to anybody else again, but it ultimately meant that she met her demise and ended up being in prison for a killing that she didn't commit. Joe being connected to Kate means that he can essentially cover up what he wants, and this was the first time we saw that he flexed the power that he had. In terms of the rest of the cast, Phoebe ended up working in a school in Thailand, Roald, Sophie and Blessing carried on as they were, Connie was clean, and Adam was killed by Kate's father. Overall review. I thought this second part of Season 4 was brilliant. I was heavily invested in the twists that were occurring, and I found myself cheering when things happened. For example, when it was revealed that the version of Rhys that Joe knew was within his mind, when Love and Beck returned, and also when Marienne was revealed to be in the box. This season took us on a whirlwind of an emotional ride, and with it starting as a murder mystery and finishing with Joe taking a deeper look inwards and being prepared to put an end to the cycle, it showed just how much of a deterioration Joe's mental state took. I feel he did see the light and wanted to be good when he woke up after being saved, but I think with Rhys being reflected in the window, it's shown that he's not going to have changed at all. The beard is gone, which means that Joe Goldberg is well and truly back. So, there you have it, You Season 4 Part 2 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos such as Endings Explained, theories and predictions and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @BrainPilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this season? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.